he wasn't born into greatness. He wasn't surrounded by noise, cameras, or glory. Dont'e Thornton came into the world in Baltimore, Maryland, a city known as much for its crime statistics as it is for its culture. His street wasn't famous, his school wasn't elite, and his early years weren't anything the world would ever care to document. But that's exactly what made his story special. Because sometimes, legends are born in silence. Growing up in the thick of Baltimore's East Side, Donte learned early on how to move fast, not just on the field, but through life. His parents worked long hours, and the television was rarely on. What raised him wasn't flashy, it was his older cousins, local coaches, and the quiet ache of wanting something more than what was handed to him. He was thin. Too thin for football, some said. His frame looked more like a sprinter's than a wide receiver's. Coaches overlooked him. Other kids towered over him. But what they couldn't measure was the fire in his chest, the one that whispered to him at night, "Keep going." He started playing backyard football with torn shoes and worn-out gloves. His first taste of competition wasn't under Friday night lights, it was on patchy grass, with makeshift goal lines and broken fences. But even then, even in games that meant nothing, Donte ran like something was chasing him. Something invisible. Something real. By middle school, he had already earned a quiet reputation. Not for his size. Not even for his stats. But for the way he could vanish downfield, like a shadow no defender could catch. He didn't celebrate. He didn't talk trash. He just ran. And ran. And ran. At home, things weren't easy. Rent was always behind. His mother worked 2 jobs, his father was in and out of the picture, and Thornton often found himself being the man of the house long before he should have had to. Football wasn't just a sport. It was a doorway. A chance. A possible ticket out. When he finally got to high school, people began to notice. Coaches began to whisper. There was something raw about him. Something they couldn't coach, couldn't replicate, and couldn't ignore. His high school coach once said, he wasn't the loudest in the room, but when the ball was in the air, it belonged to him. Still, attention was slow. There were 5-star athletes everywhere. And Thornton? He was just that tall, skinny kid from Baltimore. Underrated. Underexposed. Unspoken of. But he never stopped working. Mornings before class, he'd jog laps in the cold. Evenings, he'd run drills alone in empty fields. On weekends, when others partied, he watched game film, not of himself, but of the greats. Moss. Rice. Megatron. He didn't see himself in them yet, but he believed one day, they might see themselves in him. In 10th grade, during a game that almost no recruiters attended, Donte made a catch so impossible, it lived on local highlight reels for months. A one-handed snag, with a defender draped over him, in the final seconds. That catch didn't just win the game, it opened eyes. From that night on, Baltimore began whispering his name louder. Still not a roar. Still not national. But a spark had been lit. He was far from the finish line. But for the first time, Dont'e Thornton wasn't just a kid from the shadows. He was a name. And this was just the beginning. The silent struggles no one saw. Talent gets you noticed. But it doesn't protect you from pain. As Dont'e Thornton's name started to float through local circles, everyone assumed the path ahead would be smooth. But behind the highlight reels and rising stats, a different story was unfolding. One not caught on camera. One not written in newspaper clippings. In his junior year, Donte was living a double life. On the field, he was becoming a star, sharp roots, breakaway speed, sticky hands. But at home, things were falling apart. His mother was working overnight shifts, barely sleeping. Bills piled up. The fridge was often empty. And Donte? He was learning how to survive with a smile on his face. He never complained. Not to coaches. Not to teammates. But the pressure built quietly. There were days he skipped lunch just so his younger siblings could eat. Nights he studied by flashlight because the power had been cut off. Football wasn't just his dream, it had become his escape. His therapy. His reason to keep pushing. Despite everything, he kept performing. In one game that season, he racked up over 200 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns, all while running on just a protein bar he'd saved from lunch the day before. No one knew. And he didn't tell them. Because Donte had learned one thing very early in life: struggle doesn't care who you are. You either outwork it, or it drowns you. But the lack of attention from major recruiters started to gnaw at him. He watched as teammates with lesser stats but bigger names got offers from major programs. One by one, the stars of the city announced their commitments. And Donte? Silence. Was it the school he played for? The lack of exposure? Or maybe he was just overlooked. He started questioning himself. Not publicly, he wasn't the type to sulk or rant. But in those quiet moments, after the crowds had gone, he'd sit in the locker room and wonder, am I good enough? Then came the injury scare. During a practice late in the season, he took an awkward fall, his knee twisting beneath him. For a moment, everything stopped. The coaches ran over. Teammates surrounded him. And as he lay on the ground, staring at the sky, one thought pierced through everything else: is this how it ends? Thankfully, it wasn't a tear. Just a sprain. But it was enough to sideline him for weeks. Enough to make scouts hesitant. Enough to threaten everything he'd worked for. He came back before the playoffs, wearing a brace and carrying a chip on his shoulder. And in the final game of the season, down by 4, with just seconds left, he lined up wide, looked at the quarterback, and nodded once. The ball was snapped. Thornton sprinted. The defender grabbed at him, desperate to slow him down. But Thornton broke free, cutting inside, then back out, a perfect route, run like poetry. The pass came. Spiraling. Fast. He leapt. Time slowed. And when he came down, both feet in bounds, ball secured, the stadium exploded. It was more than a touchdown. It was a statement. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Later that night, back home in his small, cold room, Donte looked at his phone. Still no major offers. No spotlight. No interviews. But he smiled anyway. Because in his heart, he knew, the world had just witnessed a glimpse of what was coming. And when the world finally woke up, he'd be ready. Speed, silence, and the spark of greatness underscore 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 the 40-yard dash doesn't lie. And neither did Dont'e Thornton's feet. Senior year began with the kind of pressure most high schoolers couldn't handle: limited offers, limited time, and the clock ticking louder with every game. But Donte knew something that the stat sheets didn't show: speed is only deadly when it arrives quietly. In preseason workouts, he clocked in a blistering 4.4 seconds on the 40-yard dash, barefoot, on grass, no fancy cleats, no crowd. Just him and the stopwatch. His coach stood there in stunned silence, then whispered, "They are gonna regret sleeping on you." Still, nothing from the major Power 5 schools. Not a single blue blood program sent their scouts. But that didn't stop him. In the season opener, he exploded for 187 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, including an 80-yard burner where he outran 4 defenders like they were standing still. Local media started calling him the Ghost, because cornerbacks swore he disappeared mid-route. He wasn't flashy. No end-zone dances. No social media flexes. Just business. But behind that quiet, controlled demeanor was a storm brewing: years of being ignored, underestimated, underhyped. Every game became a message. He was faster than the fastest cornerbacks. Stronger than they expected. Smarter with his routes than most college-level players. He knew how to find soft spots in the defense, how to time his breaks, how to create separation like a magician vanishing into air. Mid-season, an offer finally came. Oregon. A school known for speed, innovation, and flashy uniforms. They saw what others didn't. They saw potential. Not fully polished, but explosive. Donte accepted. Quietly. Gratefully. But in his mind, it wasn't validation. It was permission to prove, once and for all, that he belonged with the best. When he arrived on campus, everything changed. New level. New pressure. New players. He walked into a wide receiver room filled with giants. 4 stars. 5 stars. Media favorites. Instagram stars. And him, the tall, quiet freshman from Baltimore. He wasn't the loudest. He didn't try to win anyone over. But in practice, when the pads hit and the route started, players noticed. Coaches noticed. Because there was something different about Donte. He moved like smoke, fast, smooth, and untouchable. Still, the representatives were limited. Redshirt rumors started swirling. Whispers that he needed development. That he was still too raw. But behind the scenes, Thornton was working in silence. First in, last out. Watching film till his eyes blurred. Studying defenders' hips. Memorizing coverages. Running routes in the cold while others slept. One assistant coach told him, "You're going to make everyone pay. Maybe not today. Maybe not this season. But when it's your time. God help the DB standing across from you." Late that year, Oregon needed a spark. In a game where their top receivers were struggling, Donte got the call. A deep post route. Nothing fancy. Snap. Drop back. Thornton ran. He hit second gear in 5 steps. By the time he reached midfield, the safety had already turned his hips, too late. The ball sailed. And Donte, true to form, rose. Gloved hand snatched it mid-air. He landed. One juke. One cut. Touchdown. He didn't celebrate. He jogged back to the sideline like it was just another rep, but that moment, that was the spark. The turning point. He wasn't just a recruit anymore. He was a problem. The forgotten phenom of high school football. Before the ESPN rankings, before the commitment graphics, before the highlight reels flooded YouTube, there was a skinny kid in oversized shoulder pads who played every game like it was his last. And even after making it to Oregon, Dont'e Thornton could never quite shake off that identity, the forgotten one. Because deep down, he remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. He remembered the long bus rides with torn cleats, where he'd close his eyes and imagine himself under college lights. He remembered checking recruiting sites only to see his name buried beneath dozens of receivers with less tape, less heart. And even now, surrounded by bright uniforms and national exposure, he still felt like he was climbing out of a hole the world had thrown him into. He wasn't jealous, he was driven. But college football was a different animal. In high school, talent could carry you. In college, only the obsessed survive. And Thornton was obsessed. He studied the route trees until he could see them with his eyes closed. He watched his own footwork in slow motion. He broke down press coverage from every defensive back in the Pac-12. While his teammates celebrated wins on Saturday night, Donte was back in the facility Sunday morning, reviewing every step he took. Still, the depth chart didn't lie. Despite his speed, size, and growing skill set, he was rarely WR1. Coaches rotated players constantly. And for every big play he made, there was another week of waiting. One game, he caught 2 passes, one of them a 50-yard bomb that sparked the team's comeback. The media buzzed. Fans tweeted. His DMs flooded. Next week? Barely targeted. It was a pattern. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it began to wear on him. Not because he needed fame, Thornton never played for the cameras. But because he knew what he was capable of. And it burned watching from the sideline as others fumbled the spotlight he had fought his whole life to reach. Midway through the season, an opportunity opened. A starter went down. Thornton got the nod. A full week of practice with the first-team offense. This was it. Game day arrived. The stadium roared. First quarter, catch on a slant route, 12 yards. Second quarter, deep curl, shake the DB, 18 yards. Third quarter, double move. Wide open. Quarterback missed him. Fourth quarter, back shoulder throw near the sideline. Thornton leapt, twisted midair, toe-tapped the sideline, and made the catch of the season. It should have been his breakout. But the media barely mentioned it. The headlines focused on the quarterback. The running back. The defense. Thornton's name? 1 line in a box score. That night, sitting in the locker room alone, sweaty jersey still clinging to him, he realized something: he was still the forgotten phenom. And maybe he always would be. But that didn't mean the world was right. It just meant he had more work to do. So he laced up his cleats again. Hit the film room. Returned to the weights. And whispered to himself what he had said since day one: they don't have to see you coming, as long as they can't stop you when you arrive. Oregon dreams and harsh realities for every young football player. Committing to a powerhouse like Oregon is a dream. The uniforms, the spotlight, the NFL scouts watching every play, it all feels like the top of the mountain. But for Dont'e Thornton, it was the start of another climb. Because the truth no one tells recruits is this: once you arrive, your past means nothing. Everyone there was a star once. Everyone had highlight tapes. Everyone was fast, strong, and confident. At Oregon, it wasn't enough to want it. You had to demand it, every single day. Donte tried to stay patient. He'd learned to trust the process. But deep down, a slow fire was growing. He had been waiting his whole life for a fair shot, and even now, that shot still felt out of reach. One afternoon during practice, a senior wide receiver blew up at a coach. He wanted more targets, more plays drawn for him. The room tensed. But Thornton stayed quiet. He believed in speaking through performance, not volume. When his representatives came, he ran each route like it was a championship play. Whether it was a deep post or a simple screen, he treated it like the scouts were watching. Even if they weren't. Still, the system didn't favor him. Oregon's playbook was complex, and their rotation heavy. Coaches leaned on veterans. Thornton's targets were limited, his breakout moments spread thin. But that didn't mean he wasn't working. By his second season, Thornton had gained weight, clean muscle. His frame, once seen as too slim, had filled out. He was becoming more than a burner, he was becoming a technician. One coach told a reporter, "Thornton's the kind of kid who doesn't need to talk to make noise. He just moves different." Yet the stat sheet didn't reflect that. Social media started asking questions. Why wasn't he playing more? Was it coaching politics? A bad scheme fit? Or just another wasted talent in a stacked room? The whispers grew louder. And in the middle of it all, Donte stayed silent. Focused. But inside, something began to shift. He had come to Oregon with dreams of being the next big thing. He wanted to prove the doubters wrong, the recruiters who skipped over him, the fans who never saw him coming. But now, after 2 seasons of waiting, of brief flashes and broken momentum, he started to ask himself, is this the right place? He had worked too hard to be a name on the roster. So one night, after another game where he barely saw the field, he sat in the dark with his phone in hand, staring at the transfer portal. The decision wasn't easy. Oregon had given him a shot when others didn't. He had teammates he respected. Coaches who believed in his future, even if they weren't using him now. But football careers are short. And Thornton had learned that loyalty didn't always mean staying still. He opened the app, took a breath, and entered the portal. That single tap sent shockwaves across the college football world. Because now, Dont'e Thornton, the silent phenom, was on the move. And wherever he landed next, the world would finally be forced to pay attention. The transfer that changed everything. Transfers are tricky. They're gambles. A fresh start can save a career, or bury it. But for Dont'e Thornton, entering the portal wasn't about fear. It was about finally taking control of his destiny. The moment his name went live, the calls started. Big-name programs. Coaches who once overlooked him. Recruiters who hadn't watched a single high school game but suddenly believed in his upside. But Thornton wasn't interested in hype. He wanted fit. A system that saw his speed as a weapon, not a backup plan. A quarterback who trusted his route. A coach who didn't just see potential, but was ready to unleash it. And then came Tennessee. The Volunteers had been quietly watching. They saw something Oregon missed, not just a deep threat, but a complete receiver still waiting for his breakout moment. Their offense was fast-paced, aggressive, and built for playmakers who could stretch the field. Thornton was exactly that. The decision didn't take long. He committed. When the announcement dropped, the headlines were loud. Oregon speedster lands in Knoxville, Vols a dangerous weapon to WR core, Dont'e Thornton, SEC's most underrated transfer. But Thornton? He stayed quiet. He didn't post a hype video. No dramatic music. No long captions. Just 3 words, let's get to work. From day one at Tennessee, the vibe was different. Coaches treated him like he belonged. Quarterbacks asked for extra representatives with him. Teammates respected the way he moved, like a veteran, not a newcomer. And Thornton? He was locked in. He'd wake up before sunrise to hit the jugs machine. Thousands of catches. No cameras. No noise. He studied the Vols playbook like scripture, memorizing hot routes, pre-snap adjustments, cover beaters. His route running became sharper, more violent at the break point. He wasn't just gliding anymore, he was cutting, exploding, commanding space. In practice scrimmages, he started torching DBs. Coaches noticed. Whispers spread fast, that transfer kid from Oregon. He's different. Then came spring game. The crowd showed up hoping to get a glimpse of Tennessee's new toys. Thornton didn't disappoint. First quarter, a slant route that turned into 40 yards after contact. Second quarter, a toe-tap sideline catch that made the highlight reels. Third quarter, a 60-yard bomb, 1 cut, gone. He didn't celebrate. Just handed the ball to the ref and jogged back. But the message was loud, Dont'e Thornton had arrived. Media outlets flipped the narrative. The same analysts who once called him inconsistent, now called him the most dangerous under-the-radar receiver in the SEC. Analysts started circling his name as a breakout NFL draft candidate. But Thornton didn't care about that. Because for him, this wasn't revenge. It was release. He wasn't fighting to be seen anymore. He was just playing free. And as the season neared, one thing became clear to every defensive coordinator in the conference: the beast they overlooked had finally found his cage door open. And he wasn't walking out. He was sprinting. A star buried in the depth chart. The hype was real. The headlines were promising. The fans were hopeful. But reality? Reality had other plans. Despite a breakout spring and dazzling flashes in fall camp, when the season opener came, Dont'e Thornton found himself once again buried in the depth chart. Third string. Rotational representatives. No feature packages. And just like that, the old feeling returned, the quiet ache of being underestimated. But this time was different. Because this time, Thornton had already proven what he was capable of. He had already torched sec corners in practice. The quarterbacks trusted him. The coaches knew his value. Yet, in the first 2 games of the season, his name barely cracked the stat sheet. 1 target. 1 reception. That was it. And social media noticed. Fans asked, "Where's Thornton?" Analysts questioned, "Why aren't they using their fastest guy?" The noise got louder. But Thornton didn't flinch. He'd been here before, pushed down, passed over, labeled as not quite ready. But instead of sulking, he did what he'd always done: he prepared. In every film session, he sat in the front row. He didn't just study his routes, he studied the defenders. Watched their hips, their tendencies, how they turned on double moves. In practice, he ran like he was in a game, full speed, full cuts, full focus. And slowly, his effort started cracking the rotation. Week 3, 2 catches, both on 3rd down conversions. Week 4, a 30-yard sideline grab that silenced a hostile away crowd. Week 5, a touchdown, his first in a Tennessee jersey. A deep post. Clean separation. Easy 6. The coaches started to listen. The game plan started to shift. And Thornton? He didn't get loud. He got better. He'd show up to the facility at 5 a.m. Not to lift. Not to run. Just to stand on the field, alone, and walk his routes. Feel the cuts. Visualize the play. Rehearse success. One of the trainers once caught him out there and asked, "Why?" Thornton just smiled and said, "Because one day, they'll finally call my number. And when they do, I'll already be there." By mid-season, the depth chart changed. His name was rising. He was now WR2, just behind the team's star senior. But make no mistake, on 3rd and long, or when the defense pressed high, it was Thornton the quarterback looked for. The fans began to chant his name. Slowly at first. Then louder. Reporters began referring to him as Tennessee's secret weapon. But what they didn't know was that he had always been a weapon. They just finally remembered to use him. And Donte? He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. Because he knew something they didn't: stars don't always shine from the top of the depth chart. Sometimes, they rise from the shadows, until they are too bright to ignore. Training in the dark, preparing for light. By now, Dont'e Thornton was no longer the unknown. His name echoed through Tennessee's locker room, was written on whiteboards in SEC defensive rooms, and whispered in late-night sports radio. But for Thornton, all the noise meant one thing: the work was just beginning. He had earned a spot. Now he had to defend it. While others were celebrating mid-season success, posting selfies, enjoying campus fame, Thornton doubled down on the grind. Early mornings turned earlier. Late nights turned later. It wasn't superstition. It wasn't panic. It was habit, built over years in Baltimore's silence, Oregon's sidelines, and Tennessee's shadows. Every rep mattered. Every drop of sweat felt like interest paid on a debt he never agreed to. A debt of being overlooked. Undervalued. Forgotten. And now that the spotlight was inching toward him, he wanted to make sure he didn't flinch. During bye week, while most of the team took a break, Thornton stayed. Alone on the practice field, catching ball after ball from a student assistant. His footwork, once raw, now moved like choreography. His hands, once questioned, became magnets. The quarterback started calling him auto-separation. The coaching staff saw it. One assistant wide receivers coach called him the most prepared receiver I've ever seen who hasn't even peaked yet. That's the part people missed: he still wasn't at his peak. Behind every catch was hours of study. Every juke, 1,000 representatives, every burst of acceleration, 100 wind sprints under the dark Tennessee sky. But Thornton wasn't just training his body, he was building his mind. He watched film of NFL legends. Jerry Rice for discipline. Marvin Harrison for footwork. DeAndre Hopkins for hands. Calvin Johnson for power. And he asked himself, what can I borrow? What can I build into my own game? The answer was all of it. Piece by piece, Thornton was becoming more than a fast receiver. He was becoming dangerous. Then came the challenge, a game against a top-ranked SEC defense. The week leading up was intense. Practices were hard. Game plans changed hourly. Pressure mounted. Coaches told him, this is the kind of game that defines a season. Or a career. Thornton smiled. Because for once, he wasn't chasing the light, it was finally shining on him. And he was ready. Game day. National broadcast. Packed stadium. Millions watching. First quarter, nothing. He was targeted once, overthrown. Second quarter, again, no targets. Crowd restless. Then, third quarter. 3rd and 11. Tennessee trailing. Coach signaled the call. Thornton locked eyes with the quarterback. Snap. He exploded off the line, hit a jab step inside, defender bit, Thornton cut back out. Wide open. Ball in the air. He leaped. Full extension. Caught it. Sideline. Stayed in bounds. First down. That catch? It cracked the dam. Next play, screen pass, Thornton turned it into 15. Next drive, deep route, touchdown. The beast was loose. By the fourth quarter, the defense shifted double coverage onto him. Too late. He finished with 6 catches, 112 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 message delivered, he didn't just deserve to be on the field. He belonged in the conversation. When the press tried to get a quote post-game, Thornton gave them the same smile he'd worn since high school. I just train in the dark, he said. So I don't blink in the light. When the spotlight finally found him. Every athlete waits for that moment, when the spotlight finds you, when the world finally pauses to notice. For most, it comes once. If you're lucky. For Dont'e Thornton, that moment came under a cold night sky, in one of the biggest SEC matchups of the season, Tennessee vs. Georgia. It was more than just a game. It was a war. Top-ranked defenses. NFL-bound talent on both sides. Scouts in the stands. Millions watching. Pressure? That was just air to Thornton now. The Vols needed a statement win. And Thornton, he needed nothing more than the ball. The first half was a grind. Tennessee's offense struggled. Georgia's defense looked like a wall made of concrete and 5-star athletes. And yet, midway through the second quarter, with Tennessee trailing and the drive stalling, something shifted. 3rd and 8. The play call? A simple dig route. Thornton lined up wide. Press coverage. Safety creeping up. Snap. He burst inside, planting hard off his right foot. The corner hesitated for half a second, that's all it took. Thornton cut across the field, chest open. Ball delivered. 1 step. 2. He slipped the first tackle. Then another. What should have been a 10-yard gain turned into a 54-yard sprint that left the entire Georgia sideline stunned. The crowd erupted. The stadium shook. And Donte? He just flipped the ball to the ref and walked away. That play cracked the armor. And Tennessee kept feeding him. Out routes, slants, jet sweeps, everything went through him. Georgia's defense adjusted, but Thornton kept answering. Like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment, because he had. Fourth quarter. Game tied. Ball on the 28. Coach looked at him. You want it? He didn't respond. Just jogged to the line. Snap. He stutter-stepped the corner. Sold an inside move. The DB bit hard. Thornton slipped behind him like smoke through a window. The ball floated in slow motion. End zone. Touchdown. Silence from Georgia. Roar from Tennessee. Thornton didn't scream. Didn't pound his chest. He just looked up at the lights. As if to say, finally. The post-game headlines weren't about the quarterback. Or the defense. They were about him. Thornton breaks out on national stage, from forgotten to feared. Donte's moment arrives. NFL scouts take notice of Tennessee transfer star. He did interviews. Gave humble answers. Thanked his coaches, his teammates. But inside, he knew, this wasn't his arrival. This was his unveiling. And while the world was just catching up, Thornton had been ready for years. He had always been the beast, they had just finally looked close enough to see it. Legacy of the beast they almost missed. When the dust settled on the season, Dont'e Thornton wasn't just another name on the roster anymore, he was the name. The one opposing coaches game planned for. The one analysts debated on live TV. The one fans wore on their backs in orange and white. But none of it came easy. And that's what made it matter. His final season stats. Impressive. Top 10 in the SEC for yards per catch. Multiple 100-plus yard games. A highlight reel that made its rounds in NFL front offices. But his real legacy couldn't be measured in numbers. It lived in every rep before sunrise, every route walked in the dark, every game played without guarantees. It was written in all the moments he wasn't seen, because that's where he became who he was. When draft season rolled around, the narratives changed. No longer overlooked. No longer potential upside. Now, it was NFL ready. Scouts raved about his speed. Coaches praised his maturity. Analysts called him a draft day steal in the making. But Thornton didn't buy into the noise, good or bad. He trained like he was still trying to make a name for himself. Because in his mind, he still was. Pro day came. His 40-yard dash turned heads, blazing fast. His vertical? Elite. His interviews? Calm. Focused. Quiet fire. Just like always. Draft night, cameras zoomed in. Prospects surrounded by family, lights, expectations. Thornton sat there, calm, no panic in his eyes. Just patience. Then, the call. Mid-round. A team needing speed, toughness, and quiet hunger. Phone rang. He answered, nodding. A simple smile. He didn't cry. Didn't jump. He stood, hugged his mother, and whispered, "We're just getting started." Social media exploded. Sleeper pick of the draft. Dont'e Thornton's story is everything right about football. Zero to hero. From silent roots to Sunday lights. But for Thornton, it was never about revenge. Never about proving the world wrong. It was about proving himself right. He didn't want to be the loudest. He wanted to be the one you couldn't ignore, even in silence. Now, young receivers study his college tape. They ask how he got faster, how he ran routes so smooth, how he stayed focused when the world wasn't watching. His answer? They don't see you until they have to. Make sure when they do, you're undeniable. That's the legacy Dont'e Thornton built. A legacy not born under lights, but in the shadows. Not gifted, but earned. Not just a star, but a beast they almost missed.